There's a new help for people with multiple food allergies. The Food and Drug Administration has approved Xolair, a medication that can help to lessen the severity of those allergic reactions. The medication is meant for people with severe anaphylaxis that is life-threatening. We asked a local allergist how it can help those living with severe allergies and whether this will allow them to overcome those allergies.
It's not intended to allow people who have food allergies to eat the things that they're allergic to at all. It's just there as an extra level of protection.
Patients take an injection of Xolair once every 2 or 4 weeks. Then, if they accidentally ingest something they are allergic to, the reaction is mild. The drug was originally invented to treat allergic asthma and has been recently approved for hives and nasal polyps and now food allergies. That extra protection can bring a feeling of security to people dealing with life-threatening allergies.
This is a game changer, and they really can open up some doors for people who have children, especially who have very severe food allergies, who really feel locked in because they're unable to go to restaurants and go to people's houses and that sort of thing.
Dr. Bayek says this drug is not meant for the emergency treatment of allergic reactions. People still need to carry their EpiPen.